Welcome. I'm Nancy Wilhelms, and I'm the executive director of Anderson Ranch, and it's really my pleasure to welcome you to this very special National Council presentation today. Before we begin our presentation, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, Toby Lewis. So let's give Toby a round of applause. And I'd like to thank our National Council supporters, as well as our corporate and media partners and other supporters for today's program. I'd also like to give a shout out to Cultured Magazine, our national media sponsor of the summer series. So yay, Cultured, yay. And then a special thank you to all of you, our National Council members, for your wonderful support and leadership of Anderson Ranch. So thank you. This program's for you. Yay. In a moment, I'm going to bring up Liza Mauk, who will introduce our speaker. Just a little bit about Liza. She's a very enthusiastic Anderson Ranch supporter, and she brings young, fresh energy to the ranch. She joined our board of trustees this year, and she has already done a fantastic job of co-chairing the National Council with Karen Lord, right over there. Yay. As an Aspen local and a mother of 3, Liza is a longtime appreciator of the arts, as well as an interior designer with impeccable taste. So please welcome Liza. Liza Mauk. I'm going to give you a hug.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Nancy. It was a pleasure to be charmed by the brilliant Doug Aitken at lunch yesterday. He is an ideal artist to be here for our National Council program. Our National Council supports programs for you to enjoy like today. Thank you for supporting our National Council, and please continue. Doug Aitken's practice of inspiring a cross-pollination of creativity and collaborative spirit is a perfect representation of Anderson Ranch. Doug Aitken is an American artist and filmmaker. His work spans every medium, from sculpture, film, landworks, soundworks, happenings, to architectural experiments. His films often explore the modern condition, and his installations create a deep cinematic experience. He has collaborated with numerous artists and musicians, and his work has been exhibited around the world. In September of 2016, a major survey of Doug Aitken's work, Electric Earth, opened at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Los Angeles, and subsequently traveled to the Modern Museum of Art at Fort Worth. Doug Aitken dreams big, outside the box, and brings these ideas to fruition in a uniquely immersive aesthetic. Notable works include his 2013 Station to Station, which crossed 4,000 miles from the Atlantic to the Pacific and presented a series of cultural and site-specific happenings. Mirage, an installation in the Southern California desert, opened in February of 2017 and is part of Desert X, a contemporary art exhibit curated by artistic director Neville Wakefield. Doug Aitken creates art in fluctuation. He challenges the viewer to think differently. We are so honored to have taken this Cali boy away from the beach to take us on an art journey with us. Welcome.
Hello. Well, thank you all for showing up today and being here. And my time in Aspen has been incredible so far. And I still have this incredible altitude sensation. So I have no idea what I'm about to say for the next 30 or 40 minutes. But what I thought might be a nice way to talk about the work would be to present kind of a number of short films, documentations of different projects. And let me dig through my pocket and find the list of what's supposed to be shown. Here it is. One of the things I really loved about walking through Anderson Ranch yesterday was, you kind of walk through an area, it'd be ceramics or printmaking or photography, but you could always see the other medium. The garage doors open or the someone was coming and going. And there's this kind of incredible sense of cross-pollination. And that was one of the things that for me, I really connected with. And that's also a quality in art that I look for in what I make. I really believe that artwork is kind of driven by questions, by concepts, and in a lot of ways, those motivations kind of build the artwork. They create the medium. So I often find myself kind of on very different journeys where there's kind of many projects we're working at once. Some projects take 5 years, some take 5 days, but it's really a journey. And the first piece I wanted to show is just a small excerpt of a piece titled Migration. This is about 10 years old, and in this work, we went across North America, and we filmed inside hotel and motel rooms, the generic hotels that you'd never remember, the Days Inn, the Best Western. And I was interested in this idea that we've created a landscape that's so repetitious, and there's this sense that you could be everywhere and nowhere at once. So in this work, you'll see these rooms, and they're very undefined where you are, but inside the rooms, we reintroduce different animals that were often indigenous to these regions. And the work was filmed over a few thousand miles, and then we premiered it at the Carnegie International. So it was projected on the side of the museum during that exhibition. But here's a little bit of that. And well, that was a small excerpt of Migration. Oh, you can just leave the light off. Then we're all together in darkness. It's a much longer piece, but this work, I was very interested in this idea of time and how you had this kind of deep history, this deep ecology, and then you have what's here now, and this kind of incredible desire for sameness and repetition, the society that we're living in. And so this is one work, and this is kind of a huge collage of works, just little snippets of pieces is what I want to do today. And the next piece is a piece that I wanted to show you because I was actually thinking of Aspen when I was running through these works. And this next work is titled Lighthouse. And it was a while back, and I was doing an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, and we were filming this piece, Sleepwalkers, and it was just incredibly urban. You know, it was hot and sweaty when we were filming it, just, you know, Canal Street in summer. And when the piece was finally up at the museum, it was kind of an installation that covered the exterior walls of Museum of Modern Art. And I found myself kind of going to the other end of the spectrum right after that and making a work entirely in nature. And so this work I want to show you was a piece where we really, we filmed all the seasons in upstate New York within almost like a 3-mile radius of this one site. And then, you know, it kind of looks at change, it looks at evolution, and then the people I was working with were going to build a foundation, an art foundation. So the idea was that we would film everything before the architecture existed, and then when the architecture was built, it would become a screen and it would disappear into the landscape. I know it sounds like a rambling person with altitude euphoria, so I'll just show you this piece. So with Lighthouse, one of the things that I liked about the project was that the work would just kind of come on at sunset every night and just run through the evening and then come off in the morning, and it kind of lived its own life cycle. And the next piece that I'd like to share with you is quite different. I still hear the crickets and the meadows in the background. Um, this next work is titled Song 1, and I was asked to come down to DC to do an exhibition at the Hirshhorn Museum. And many of you have probably seen it before, but it's a huge kind of intimidating circular concrete structure. And I remember I got in the taxi from the airport. I arrived at the Hirshhorn at dusk. I opened the taxi door, and I kind of saw this huge, imposing shape. And I realized that I was down there to talk about doing an exhibition inside the museum, but I couldn't help myself. I thought, what if we could activate this large piece of brutalist architecture and bring it to life? And wow, does that get louder? Okay, well, whatever. But anyway, so I spoke with the museum and Carrie Brower, and we started talking about this idea of making a 360-degree film. And if you ever walk through the Washington Mall at night, it's absolutely dead. It's like tumbleweeds are blowing by. And nobody goes there. And so I thought about this idea, and I thought, could we create a social space where there is none? Could we activate this museum where the exterior facade is really kind of dead? And so I started embarking on this idea of making this kind of wide panoramic film. And after a long time working on it, I thought I need an idea that's incredibly simple, something so minimal. And I was in the studio, it was over the holidays, and I was listening to the same song over and over, I noticed. And then the next day I'd go and I just wanted to hear that song again. And I went back and I looked at the playlist, and it was something like 800 times, something ridiculous. And I thought about this idea, and I thought, isn't that one of the incredible inventions of the 20th century? It's the perfect song. That idea of the pop song, the song that just goes through the air. It can be in a taxi in the Philippines. It can be an elevator in Berlin. We all know it. So anyways, long story short, in making this piece, I worked with this one song that was written in the 1920s. It's called I Only Have Eyes for You. And we took the song, and I worked with a number of musicians. We re-recorded it about 60 times, from vocals to slide guitar. And I thought if I could use this one simple thing that was so omnipotent that everyone knew, it could become like a key to a door. And when you see this piece, maybe it can explain itself a little bit better. Please.
You are here, and so am I. Maybe millions of people go by, but they all disappear from view.
You are here, and so am I.
You are here, and so am I. I don't know if it's cloudy or bright. I only the moon may be.
I don't know we're in a garden.
I only have eyes for you.
Thanks. Well, I wish I could show you the whole piece, but we need a large concrete museum. One of the surprising things about Song 1 for me was, you never really know what to expect when you create an artwork and when you put it out there in the world. And with this work, it was interesting because oftentimes when you do an exhibition, the people show up at the beginning, kind of at the opening, and then as an exhibition runs the course of its life, people have seen it, there's kind of less and less people. And with Song 1, it was interesting because people had this kind of ownership of the work. And, it was months into it, and we would find, people picnicking, cars double parked, people, kind of going there and having certain scenes that they were obsessed with. And I think that's an important point, that idea of how to create a bridge between the artwork and the viewer, and how to lose that separation. And I think in some ways, that's one of the things I've always been fascinated by, is that idea of, I don't necessarily want to be someone who's looking at an artwork. I want to be one with it. I want to go inside it. I want it to be a door that can open up. And, I can share some more ideas of that later. But the next piece I'd like to show you is a piece that I made in Brazil. It's a permanent installation. It's on a hillside in the jungle. And this piece took us about 5 years to build. And you'll see this pavilion, and it's circular, it's glass, it's like a lens that you walk inside. But beneath it is a hole that goes 700 feet into the earth. And at the bottom of this 700-foot deep hole is a series of sensors and geological microphones. So as the earth rotates, it's constantly creating friction, and the tectonic plates are moving. So in this installation, the movement of the earth is amplified into the surface. So when you go into this work, it's living, it's in real time. So whatever's happening in that moment is happening around you. You're hearing it. Here, I'll just let it play. So when I was working on this piece, I kept thinking about the idea of time and how we're constantly focused on the future and the past and how rare it is to be in the present. And we have this kind of this fast forward and this rewind that we're living in. And we think that everything's in flux and everything's changing, and how do we control this sense of change? But what we're standing on is perfectly stable. Everything's okay. The floor of the room I'm standing on, the bed I'm in tonight. But in fact, everything's in motion. Everything's in rotation. Everything's a cycle. And with this work, I want to really explore that idea. I want to find a way that you, the viewer, anyone, any time of day, any year could walk into this and have a distinctly different experience. And I think in that sense, what happens is the artwork comes to life. It becomes living. It becomes something which is continuously changing. And this is something I think about very much. I think it's one of the frontiers of art for me that's very fascinating is if an artwork can live with you, and it can change with you, and it can have a continuous dialogue. The next piece that I will share with you is, I have no idea because it's black, but that's fine. I think it's this piece, Station to Station. And Station to Station's well, it's an incredibly different work than this that we just saw. It's a project. It's kind of a explosion that kind of went across the country, across North America. And I was thinking about the idea of how we see culture, and we all have lunch today, for example, and we might talk about everything from music to a film we saw and reference the film to something we read. Everything's one. But when you look at the way culture is currently, it's incredibly segregated. You have contemporary art way over here. You have cinema here. These dialogues don't really speak to each other. Music is over here again. Maybe the musician has to play the same circuit, the same tour, the same stages over and over. Maybe the artist is making their work increasingly conservative so it can be exhibited inside a gallery space or the confines of a museum. So I thought about this, and I thought, really, what would it take to have all these silos disappear? So, kind of in a small way, I thought, if I just reach out to people who are creating in all mediums, and I try to put a project together that kind of cuts out the middle person. There's no capitalism involved. There's no structure. And it's just, what do you want to make? Let's make it happen. Let's go on the road. Let's do something nomadic. Let's create an adventure, both for the creators and everyone who encounters this project. So I thought, how do we do this? How do we make something that's in motion? And the more I looked into it, I realized that, in America, there's this train system that's seldom used. And the train system goes through not only the huge cities, but a lot of tertiary places, a lot of places where you might go into this station and there's one bench and a tumbleweed and a guy sleeping on the floor, and that's it, And a lot of these train stations are built in the 1920s and 30s, WPA era, kind of fantastic architectural specimens. They're just sitting in a point of disuse. So, long story short, this project Station to Station, with it, I got together about 400 or 500 different artists and musicians. Everyone performed and created something new. Everything was happening in motion while this train was going across America, essentially. And every time we stopped, we'd use these train stations to stage happenings. And the happenings were all very different. It wasn't a tour. It was completely different people, ranging from, a musician like Patti Smith that says, Doug, I wrote this one song and I only want to play it in St. Paul, to an artist who, like Ed Ruscha, for example, you might say Ed Ruscha's work, but I talked to Ed and he goes, oh, Doug, I don't really want to do a drawing and painting. I was thinking of some kind of artwork people could eat or something. So Ed made 500 cactus omelets in Winslow, Arizona. So it became this kind of, huge kaleidoscope of new creations. Anyways, this is a short, 3-minute excerpt of kind of film we made out of it, but it will give a little slice of the cactus omelet. Station to Station is a landscape of ideas, constantly changing, constantly evolving. Always asking, what is creativity in the 21st century?
A happening is an art form which was introduced to get closer to the public, to bring everything closer together.
The road is this great place of churn, place of transition.
Just kind of its own weird thing, and I feel like something very, very special is happening.
I'm interested in this landscape without horizon.
I've always had the impression that we were going with the mood of the moment.
Here it is, bop, 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 bop. And so the information is so immediate and so precise.
Listening to what you're really doing, paying attention to what you're doing in the most minute detail.
People believe things are possible, and that is a fertile place for art to really flourish.
What's wonderful about the road trip is that it's about desire. First off, the landscape as it's framed through the window is an astonishing thing. It is never enough. You always must have more. You must see more. You have to continue. You know, you end when you're exhausted.
Is the room spinning or am I spinning? Because I think the room's spinning and I think I'm standing still. I don't know. It's all relative.
I think I'm excited about not always knowing exactly where I am.
Been doing railroad work for 37 years. It's the easiest way to put it. It's the best job I've ever had in my life.
Is there such a thing as the frontier anymore, right? It's always been imaginary, but now I think it's even more imaginary.
So, yeah. One of the things that really struck me about this project was how many people kind of came forth and stepped up and really wanted to use the journey, the train, everything about it to create new projects. And I saw so many artists and musicians doing things they've never done before. And they had that kind of passport, passport to freedom, you know, that you have when you're not in your studio, when you're not in the city you live in, when you're not surrounded by peers who you're feeling might judge you, but instead you're out in the open. And you know, I think that was it was kind of amazing to watch that. There's one small thing I share with you, which I really loved with this project. You saw in the last few shots that there was a moving light on the train. And I kept thinking about the invention of cinema and the zoetrope. The zoetrope being this, you put a candle in the middle and there's photographs, transparencies that you spin around it. And it creates this idea of motion, which would be so exciting if it were the 1890s. And I thought about this idea. I thought, could we turn the train into a sculpture? We kind of curated this train. We found all these different cars from the 1920s, 30s, 40s and stuff. We, you know, redid the inside so they became studios, nomadic studios. So we could have a recording studio or an editing studio or these different things like that. But I kept thinking about this idea of the guy in the middle of the farm just standing there at night, you know, drinking a beer next to his pickup truck or something. And this train kind of comes by. And normally trains are moving in darkness. And I thought if I could have this train and the light on it was moving the same speed that the train was moving forward, the light was moving backwards, it would be like a zoetrope. So that person standing there in the distance could blink their eye and suddenly see the train frozen like an image. And when their eye snaps open again, it's gone. So I love this idea of kind of having this holographic experience kind of moving across the American landscape. Hold on, let me see what's next. I won't bore you much longer, I promise. Okay, so we're almost near the end of the road, and we're actually at the end of the road, and now we're going to go off the road because there's no more road, and we're going to go into the ocean. So this work is a piece I've been working on for the last year and a half, and I was putting together this exhibition in Los Angeles at MoCA, and I live in Los Angeles, and this was a huge body of work in a very large space, and I was kind of very consumed with that, but I kept thinking to myself, I should do something outside of the museum also. And, you know, there's a history of works that exist outside the museum, from, you know, urban art, street art, graffiti art, to land art from the 60s and 70s. But, you know, for me, actually, every morning I just walk out to the Pacific Ocean alone. And for me, it's kind of this mirror, this reflection. And when I look at the horizon, I think about this. Is that my phone? Whose phone? You can put it on the microphone. And Isha can freestyle rap to it. But I kind of always use the idea of the horizon as a tool. And to me, the horizon is what hasn't happened yet. It's the kind of frontier. It's a space for ideas and experimentation. So I thought of this, and for me, the ocean is a very powerful presence. And so I thought, why don't we make something in the ocean? Why don't we make something under the ocean? Why don't we create an artwork that could be like a door that you could open that could take you under the sea, under the Pacific? So I had this idea to make these 3 sculptures that would float under the ocean surface, 10, 20, and 30 feet deep. And I thought about this, and I thought, you know, if you could have something where the viewer is suddenly outside of their element, they're no longer looking at the walls and the artworks on the walls, and instead they're literally going underwater, and they're floating horizontally, weightlessly. They're moving in slow motion. They're going through these incredible worlds, which we find as both ominous, mysterious, and fascinating. Over 70% of the Earth is under the water. So this work was an attempt to explore that, and I'll just let the work kind of speak for itself. I think art is a frontier, but it's also a crossroads. And with some of these projects, I feel very grateful that we're able to have these larger collaborations. With the underwater pavilions, I have a studio. We're supposed to make art with a small a. And, all of a sudden, there's people coming to the door who are marine biologists, oceanographers, people like, Sylvia Earle, who's in her 80s, who's one of the most incredible, marine conservationists, and really kind of collaborating and partaking in these projects. And it's interesting. I think in the last few years, I've seen things expand more and more from, there's the UCLA neurological department's working with our studio to study the source of creativity. At the same time, we have collaborations with NASA, and we're getting feeds from the Jupiter mission. And just to see that art can just keep moving. So in closing, I just show you one last piece, which is a work titled Mirage. And Mirage is a work which it's been on my mind for so long, and we're finally able to bring it into existence. And the work it's a simple suburban house, the kind you'd never remember, the kind you've driven by millions of times. And I wanted to take that form of architecture, that distinctly American suburban architecture, and I wanted to kind of take it out of its element and bring it onto a hillside above the desert, where it could look into the urban sprawl, the kind of grid of lights that you see at nighttime. I wanted it to appear and disappear, but more than anything, I wanted it to be an artwork that the viewer owns, the viewer experiences, and each and every viewer has a different encounter. So I'll let that fly. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, and please continue to keep your eye on the horizon for all of us. Thank you.